Hey, Twisted listeners, I'm Cindy, and this is Twisted Listers, a podcast about murder and lists. And I'm coming to you with another solo story while Diva is on her maternity leave from the Twisted Listers. This case was suggested to me by our dear friends at 505 Resin Works, Life and Death on the Fringe, and Lady XY, who does our outro music. And yes, it's the same two people responsible for all of that creativity because they are creative powerhouses. And they also, they know fucked up crime stories, and so they suggested this. And I'm just going to warn everybody right now, this is one of the worst cases I've ever covered. I know we say that a lot, but I feel like we are just reaching into the depths more and more as time wears on. We're just getting worse. And to prove my point, this is the murder of 10-year-old Victoria Martens. Now, beyond this being the murder of a child, which you all know I don't like to cover, this is also a wholly unsatisfying tale, super frustrating and extraordinarily graphic and horrifying. So if you're not into this kind of thing, I would say now's the time to switch off and come back next week when we have a more palatable murder, which I don't even know what that means. In any case, I also want to apologize. I'm real fucking sick. So if I sound a little crazy, that's why. But I just want to get these stories out and, keep the podcast going while Diva is enjoying a little time off. So here we go. Victoria Martens was born August 23rd, 2006 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her mother, Michelle, was originally, I believe, from New Jersey, but had moved out to New Mexico. Not super sure why, but had settled there. I believe her parents also either moved there after she did, or perhaps that's why Michelle moved there, because her parents lived there. But either way, she had the support of her parents while she raised Victoria. Now, she needed the support because Michelle was, in fact, a single mother, not only to Victoria, but Victoria also had a younger brother. Now, Victoria and her younger brother, he doesn't really factor into this case too much, they had different dads, and her younger brother's dad was local to New Mexico, was involved in their son's life, and luckily at the time this takes place, he is with his dad, so he's not really involved in this at all. Victoria, however, does not really have a father figure. Not even sure she knows who her father figure is, so she is full-time with Michelle. So that's kind of an important factor here to consider. Now, very unfortunately, this case takes place on Victoria's 10th birthday, and this day started out really well for Victoria. She was going to school at Petroglyph Elementary School, and her class had a party for her. There were cupcakes, they sang her happy birthday, she got little gifts from her friends. Everything was really great. Now, she gets on the bus to go home and ends up at home and talks to her grandparents on the phone, Michelle's parents, tells them, I had a good day, everything was great. And, they just check in with her, wish her happy birthday. She's having a party that Saturday, so they're going to see her then, and it's going to be this really fun day. Everybody's really looking forward to it. Now, Michelle Martens is a really loving mother. She tries her best. She's got a part-time job, but she doesn't make great choices where men are involved, really. She has a lot of boyfriends off and on. Things are kind of unstable. And most recently, her boyfriend is a man named Fabian Gonzalez. Now, Fabian here is a fucking loser. He's a fucking felon. He's a criminal. He has child abuse charges against him. I guess he had gotten to a fucking drunken police chase while his girlfriend and her daughter were in the car. So he has, he's been, in and out of prison for this type of shit. He's just not a good guy. Super into drugs, just really does not have his shit together. And Michelle, she doesn't do drugs. She had recently got a new job that she had to drug test for. So she keeps her shit together personally, but she makes really bad choices where men are involved. So beyond Fabian kind of being a problem, he also has a cousin named Jessica Kelly. Now, Jessica Kelly also in and out of prison for various drug-related offenses, violent crimes, another just winner of a person. I mean, this woman's eyebrows are inversely correlated, like how tiny they are is inversely correlated to how long her rap sheet is. And she has those like 90s eyebrows where it's like one eyebrow hair, just all the way across. I'm sorry, I just have to make fun of her because she's like the worst person alive. And she just looks like a 90s like nightmare. So anyway, this lovely woman gets out of prison, and so Fabian and Michelle have only been dating for a month, and Fabian has already moved in with her. And now Jessica Kelly gets out of prison, and Fabian makes a deal with her behind Michelle's back to allow her to move in with them for $50 a month. Now, this guy doesn't even bother to tell his girlfriend whose home it is with her daughter, and instead just offers this to his cousin and thinks he's gonna like somehow slide it by Michelle, like she's not gonna realize that Jessica's there. So Jessica gets out of prison, I believe, like August 13th, 2016. And she's staying with them. Michelle's not super happy about it, but I think she's pretty susceptible to like other people's manipulation. She just kind of lets Fabian tell her what to do. So they're all living together in this house. And Fabian and Jessica are using meth constantly. So really not a good place for Victoria, not a good place for Michelle even, and just bad all around. So I'm just going to jump right in and then we'll kind of backtrack because this is a big, long case. So on the morning around 4 a.m. of August 24th, 2016, neighbors call police because of a disturbance at Michelle's apartment. When police arrive, they find Michelle and Fabian outside. Michelle has a gash to the center of her head that's like bleeding. It's a huge wound, and Fabian has a black eye. Now, they both tell police that Jessica Kelly attacked them with an iron, that she was trying to kill them, and that she is still in the apartment with Victoria, with 10-year-old Victoria. So police go to the door, they knock on the door, Jessica opens it, sees it's the police, slams it shut, locks it, and she then runs to the back and jumps off the second-story balcony to try to run away. Now, she ends up fracturing her ankle when she does this and is taken to the hospital because she can't fucking walk, which, like, everything about this is stupid. Police, meanwhile, break into the house, they get in, and they immediately smell smoke. They run into the bathroom where the smoke is coming from, and there they find a burning blanket with a little girl wrapped inside of it. Now, when they put the fire out, they immediately know that this little girl, Victoria Martens, is not alive. But what they discover as they look more into what's happening is fucking horrifying. As they unwrap the blanket, they realize that Victoria Martens' arms are missing. She has strangulation marks around her neck that look like manual strangulation, and her left leg is almost entirely cut off. Later, one of the police who arrived on the case said that he felt like he had done her a disservice by not checking for a pulse, even though he knew she was dead. So he went back inside and checked for a pulse. And I think that that's a really fucked up and sad kind of like, he knows she's dead, but he feels so terribly for this child that he's just going to check because he feels like if he doesn't, that he hasn't done his job and he hasn't done everything he can for her, even though it's far too fucking late. So police are now like, what the fuck happened? They start looking through the house. They find Victoria's severed arms in plastic bags near the trash. They find Jessica, Fabian, and Michelle's wallets and keys and ID cards all together, like piled up, kind of like hidden. It just is a very fucking weird scene and a very fucking horrifying scene. So they take these three, they arrest them. Obviously, they take them to the police station. They interview neighbors. Neighbors basically give them a timeline, which we'll get into, but they say they heard screaming at the apartment. They heard all sorts of crazy shit. And they give a timeline, which again, I'll get into. But for right now, they take these three, they take Michelle, Fabian, and Jessica to the station and they interview them. And the story that they are told by Michelle is fucking horrifying. Michelle says, I mean, she's interviewed for like 9 hours. All of them are. Fabian just denies. Jessica denies at first, and then also kind of blames Fabian. But Michelle gives them this crazy fucking story. Now, her story is that she drugged Victoria with methamphetamine to calm her down while Fabian and Jessica sexually assaulted and murdered her. She tells police that they all did this together because for months, Michelle has been sort of allowing people to sexually assault her daughter for her own sexual pleasure, which is just beyond insane. Now, when they do the autopsy, they find that Victoria does in fact have an STI, which why the fuck would a 10-year-old have that? So that really sort of gives a little credence to Michelle's story. So she basically said that Victoria's been abused for months and months, and that this all was just kind of like the culmination of that, and that it ended in a brutal murder. And that, Fabian and Jessica then dismembered her, and then Jessica later attacked them with an iron. Now, Fabian says that Jessica attacked him with an iron right around 2 a.m., but police are like, then why did it take you 2 hours to call us? This all looks very fresh. So they know he's lying. Jessica denies anything going on, blames Fabian, so they know she's lying. So Michelle's kind of version of things seems to be the most believable in the moment, at least. So police start looking into this. And also, this is a huge fucking thing in the community, and this is the story that is ultimately given to the press kind of from the start, which is a big fucking problem, as we'll see later. These 3 trash can humans were held on $1 million cash bond while police tried to figure out what the fuck happened and verify Michelle's story and just, put a fucking case together because this is absolutely fucking horrific. What they find is that Victoria was in fact manually strangled to death and died sometime between 7:30 p.m. and 8:45 p.m. on her 10th birthday. They also find that she was dismembered post-mortem, thank God, had also been stabbed, and then the flames didn't really do much. It just really set the blanket on fire, and that was something Jessica Kelly did while she was in the house, knowing that police were there. So it was like some weird last-ditch attempt to, get rid of the body, which is just, what the fuck. Now, here is where things start to get real hinky and real hard to follow, so I'm going to try to break this down as best I can, and hopefully it will be in a way that people can follow. So what police found, so the 3 of them are arraigned, they're arrested in 2016, August, obviously, arraigned kind of for trial in 2017, and they're all set to go to trial in the fall of 2018. Now, in June of 2018, police came forward with a press conference to talk about new evidence in the Victoria Martens case. And what they said effectively turned this case on its fucking head and just rewrote everything we thought we knew. So now that police had the timeline of when Victoria likely died, they used cell phone data, they used eyewitness testimony, and they used kind of, the defendant's testimonies to put together their best idea of what may have actually happened. And it was either the courts or Michelle Martens' lawyers that had a psychiatrist kind of look into her interview tapes once police started to realize that her confession was likely very fucking false. And this psychiatrist came forward and said, Michelle has probably some sort of developmental disability, a very low IQ. She's extremely susceptible to suggestion. And it sounds like everything that she told police was actually kind of fed to her by police. Now, they didn't find that police intentionally did this, although the police fucked this up start to finish, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just created a narrative, fed it to her, and she said, yeah, that's what happened. But according to this professional, he was like, I really wouldn't think that anything she said is necessarily true, including the abuse of her daughter from before. Now, you might ask, okay, well then, how did Victoria have an STI if she hadn't been being abused for her mother's sexual pleasure? So what was also found in the investigation was that the New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department, which is basically their child protective services, had been called on Michelle Martens 5 separate times over about a year before this murder occurred. And all 5 of those calls went unanswered, essentially. So at one point, a neighbor called and said that Victoria's grandparents were essentially using excessive force or some sort of inappropriate punishment for Victoria. There was another time that a friend of Michelle's called because Michelle told her that her boyfriend had attempted to kiss Victoria. Now, to be clear, Michelle broke up with this guy immediately after, But this really shows a lack of good decision making on Michelle's part, as this man had actually been accused of trying to kidnap a little girl previously. So, I mean, it's just real fucking bad. And things are just, outwardly, like neighbors said that Michelle was like a good mom. She did her best, but like obviously she's just making worse and worse decisions for her life and consequently for Victoria's. But the main point here is that the Family, Child, and Protective Services like did nothing on these calls. And later, when this came to light during the investigation, the police lied to the public and lied to reporters and said, oh, yeah, we did investigate this. We didn't find anything wrong. But what really happened, Victoria's grandparents filed a lawsuit later on. And what they basically said was like, when we talked to CYFD, they told us, oh, go to the police because a guy trying to kiss a child isn't like attempted rape is a crime. Attempted kissing is not a crime. So go talk to the police. They talked to the police and the police are like, we can't do anything for you. They didn't check in on Michelle. They didn't check in on Victoria. They didn't check the apartment. They didn't do shit. They just completely let this slip through the cracks, which is like not at all surprising. And circling back to Victoria's STI, this is why this is such a big deal. Because when Michelle was in custody during, the interviews after Victoria was murdered, she told police that this man, David, had actually raped Victoria. And that is how she got the sexually transmitted infection. And if anybody had followed up on these calls, on these allegations, they probably would have figured that out. They would have arrested this man, and Victoria could have been put into a safer situation and would probably still be alive. So this is a huge fuck up. And the police, basically what they did was they just tried to cover their asses from the beginning. They didn't try to, take responsibility, fix anything. They just straight up were like, oh yeah, we did look into it. And then later when it was found out they didn't, they were like, well, why would we look into that? It's not a big deal. So good job, guys. But anyway, this kind of also takes away, okay, so this man raped Victoria. So that's how the STI comes into play. And so now we're going to talk about how Michelle's confession is not real, how we know that, and what police kind of figured out really did happen. Now this gets confusing. And again, I don't believe that police have ever actually found the truth. I think they did find the truth and they're choosing to like not believe it because they're idiots. But you all tell me what you think. So sort of just based on Michelle's story given to police, which did change quite a bit, by the way, the three are all arrested and they are charged with multiple things, including murder, intentional abuse of a child, aggravated criminal sexual penetration, tampering with evidence, and I think also something along the lines of like child neglect resulting in death or child abuse resulting in death. So these were the charges originally filed against all three of these motherfuckers. Now, when police started to really dig in, they looked at phone records, eyewitness testimony, the testimony of these three assholes, and here is what they came up with. They actually came up with a timeline based on phone records that showed that both Fabian and Michelle were in and out of the house all night, and that Victoria was alone with Jessica for much of this time. Now, this actually started earlier in the day when Michelle had been convinced by Fabian to go ahead and go with him on like some drives to go pick up drugs, essentially. So instead of picking up Victoria, her 10-year-old, from the bus stop, she texts her mom and asks if she can do it. Now, her mom didn't get back to her quick enough, so Fabian convinced her to allow Jessica to do this. Now, we later find out from Fabian that he and Michelle were both aware that Jessica was high on methamphetamine and had been since the night before when they were all at a party where the two of them were doing drugs. Now, again, Michelle wasn't doing the drugs, but she was very well aware of what was going on and still decided to have this meth head that she's known for, 10 days pick her 10-year-old up from the bus stop. So Fabian calls Jessica and asks her to do it, and Michelle just takes it on, good faith that it's going to happen. Well, it didn't happen, so Victoria had to walk home from the bus stop where she's met by Jessica, a fucking tweaker she's known for 10 days. And the two of them are hanging out while Fabian and Michelle go to score drugs for Fabian. Now, apparently they were just looking for weed, but I don't really give a fuck what it was, because what the fuck are you doing? Pretty soon after that, around 5 o'clock, Michelle and Fabian returned to the apartment. And at some point, I guess Jessica, in her weird, like, tweaker state, gave Victoria $45 for her birthday. Well, Fabian finds this out and he fucking takes it from her. He makes her give it to him and he's like, no, I'm going to keep this money. But in return, he takes her to the gas station around 6 o'clock to go, like, buy some fucking snacks, right? Then around 6:20 they come back to the apartment, and at 6:30 Michelle and Fabian leave to go to his brother's house to pick up more weed or God knows what. 7:02 they come back to the apartment where Jessica and Victoria are together already. And at 7:05 Victoria is seen with Jessica alive. Now, a lot of neighbors said, "Oh, Victoria was happy. She was riding her scooter in the parking lot. She invited us to her birthday party." They also said that Jessica was like combative, rude, seemed like she wanted to fight, didn't want to talk to anybody. Like it was a really weird, like neighbors realized something weird was going on because they're like, why the fuck is Victoria with this fucking weird ass chick who's being rude, who seems to be on drugs? Like, what the fuck is going on? Now, police also found out later from Fabian that Jessica had been having sort of like mental breaks where she was like asking him if he believed in Jesus and telling him that like she saw God and was just generally very paranoid. So he and Michelle both know this, and yet they continue to leave Victoria alone with Jessica. So just after neighbors see Victoria, Michelle and Fabian leave again. Again, this is proven by their cell phone data. And they go to, I don't know, a couple of other places. They're just driving around until about 8:45 when they get back to the apartment. Now, that right there shows that neither one of them was present when Victoria was murdered. So right there, that completely blows apart Michelle's statement. So now they kind of go back to Jessica, they go back to Fabian, and they're like, we know that this is fucking bullshit. Why don't you tell us what really happened? So Fabian kind of dives in. Like I said, he said, Jessica's been having these like paranoid delusions. She's high on meth, but Michelle and I wanted to go get drugs, so we left Victoria with her. Police are like, good job, you fucking asshole, whatever. So they then talk to Jessica, and her story is fucking insane. She basically says, I was home alone, and a man showed up at the door asking for Favo. And Favo was Fabian's drug name. And she tells the guy, whoever this guy is, that she's never seen before, never seen again, he's not home. And he asks, is Victoria home? And she's like, yeah. And then she lets this guy go into Victoria's room, and she goes out on the balcony and smokes a cigarette. Now the guy leaves, and a couple of minutes later, she goes into Victoria's room, and she sees that Victoria is dead on the floor. Now this is what this person says. This person who was having drug-induced delusions and was home alone with Victoria. No neighbors said they ever saw a man. No neighbors said there was any sort of, anything. They only ever saw Victoria and Jessica. So police are like, okay, so then what happened? She said, well, Michelle and Fabian come home. I keep Victoria in her room, and when they get there, I tell them, oh, she's asleep. She's asleep, whatever, let's just hang out. And Michelle's like, okay, cool, glad you put her to bed, thanks so much. So they then hang out, they watch TV, they smoke weed, they do their thing, and then Michelle goes to bed. So she says, oh, I had Fabian put, Michelle to bed. She said Fabian then walked into Victoria's room, and without saying anything, without talking to her, he just starts cutting her up. He just starts dismembering her to hide the body. And she walks in, and he's mid-cut when she's like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then she decides to help him. This is this fucking person's story. This is her story. And police are like, yeah, keep going. Tell us more. So she basically says, we decided to dismember the body and hide the evidence. So Michelle wouldn't know. She doesn't call police when she finds out this guy fucking murdered Victoria. She just waits for them to come home. Oh, one other thing. Neighbors said that they did see Jessica carrying Victoria's body downstairs in a blanket as Fabian and Michelle were coming home, and that when she saw them, she turned back around and took Victoria inside. And she admitted that she did that, but didn't really give an explanation. What I'm thinking is that she was trying to dump the body, and when she realized she didn't have time to do it, she hid her and created this fucking weird story. So now Fabian's just randomly, cutting up this girl. They put her in the fucking bathtub, wrapped in a blanket. Jessica cleans up the blood, and Fabian goes to bed. And he's just like, whatever, we'll deal with this in the morning, just put her in the bathtub. Which also makes a lot of sense, tweaker logic, right? So then Jessica tells police, yes, I did attack Michelle with an iron because I decided I was going to kill Fabian and Michelle because I didn't want to go back to prison. So that's why later on, hours later, I attacked them while they're in bed. So according to Jessica, some random ass dude came in and killed Victoria. Fabian just started dismembering her without asking any questions. He then went to bed with Michelle, and then Jessica attacked them both in an attempt to get away with the not murder of Victoria, because she didn't murder her, but she's going to kill them to cover up the murder somebody else did. So this makes a fuck ton of sense, right? Now, you would think that police would be like, this is a load of horse shit, right? Wrong. Police actually found that Fabian didn't have DNA on Victoria's body, really, and Jessica barely did either, but they did find the DNA of a fourth unidentified male on her back. Now, this DNA was either like skin or saliva. It wasn't like seminal fluid or any sort of like anything that is like easy to match against anybody else. And they took that as a way of taking Jessica's story seriously. They're like, oh, maybe another man did come in. Now, let me explain to you how fucking stupid the police are. They didn't even consider that it might have been a schoolmate, that it could have been a boy in her class, like hugging her or tickling her for her birthday or who knows fucking what. They just decided that this fucking tweaker's bullshit story has to be at least somewhat true. So they dropped the murder charges against Michelle. They dropped the murder charges against Fabian, which that's fine. They weren't there. Fabian still gets like child endangerment resulting in death, as does Michelle, because they left Victoria with Jessica, knowing that she's on fucking drugs and having like violent delusions. So they both still have those, but they dropped the rape charge against Fabian, they dropped the murder charge, and then, you guys, they dropped the murder charge against Jessica. They dropped the murder charge against the woman high on meth alone in the room with Victoria at the time of her death because there's some random DNA on her that they can't explain. And so they've decided there's a mystery man who actually came to this house and murdered Victoria and is still on the run. And this is the best these fucking people can come up with. And the official case basically says, we're still looking for a fourth unidentified suspect. That is the person that we would charge with murder. And I swear to God, this is what they're going with. So police are basically just eating up this obvious bullshit fucking story based on some fucking contact DNA found on the back of a little girl who was at school earlier in the day. Like, I don't understand. It fucking hurts my head. So basically, they come to the conclusion, and I believe this is correct, that Michelle, while a terrible fucking mother and a shitty person, was just an idiot making terrible decisions and really didn't have anything to do with her daughter's death. That Jessica did tell her that her daughter was dead as the police were arriving that night, but that was the first that she heard of it because she's so easily controlled by others. When she got home, she was told to go to bed. So I think police got that right. Michelle was offered a deal to testify against Fabian and I believe also Jessica. And in return, she was given a charge of child abuse resulting in death. And she was given 12 years with 6 served. So I believe she could be getting out like anytime now. Like anytime. Because she was sentenced in like 2018 and she'd already served a couple of years and good behavior, you get time off. So, I mean, she'll be out imminently, which is insane. Now, Jessica also took a plea deal, which blows my fucking mind. For whatever reason, the police decided they wanted Fabian to be the fall guy. They want him to be the bad guy. So Jessica takes a plea deal and pled no contest to 6 charges, including reckless child abuse resulting in death. She, very luckily, was sentenced to 44 years in prison. But, like, it should be life. It should be life without parole. She fucking murdered a child. Fabian Gonzalez went on trial. He's the only one who didn't take a plea deal, who decided to fight it in court. And he was also given child abuse with reckless disregard and sentenced to 37.5 years in prison. So those are like, I'm glad that Jessica got the worst, longest sentence, but they are the official statement is that they're still looking for a fourth man who was the one who actually killed Victoria. And if we can just talk about what really probably happened, here's my best guess just based on not being a fucking idiot and reading through the case. Fabian and Michelle left Jessica alone with Victoria, knowing full well that Jessica was high on meth and having like various mental breaks that were varying levels of violent. They had been with her the night before at a party where things got violent. They had seen the way that she was asking about Jesus and talking about God, and obviously was like not mentally together. And they were like, let's leave this 10-year-old with her because we don't care enough about this child. We want to go pick up drugs. I believe that while they were gone picking up drugs, Jessica flew into a weird paranoid rage and choked Victoria to death for no fucking reason. She murdered this poor, scared little girl on her 10th birthday because she was high on drugs. I believe she then hid the child in her bedroom, in Victoria's bedroom, and told Fabian what happened. And I believe that Fabian attempted to help Jessica cover up her tracks. I believe that when that went south between the two of them, after they had dismembered her, that a fight broke out. And I forgot to mention, here's some shit. Fabian and Jessica dismembered Victoria. Fabian removed her heart and organs. This is not something that a normal human, not that any normal human would dismember, but what the fuck are they doing? Like, this is drug-fueled insanity. They are removing this 10-year-old's organs. Like, what does that help? What are they doing? If they're trying to dismember her and throw her away, like, that's bad enough. But he's literally taking her heart out of her fucking body. Like, what the fuck is going on? So I believe that the two of them were doing this and things went south. Like, Michelle was asleep, just blissfully unaware of fucking anything and not even bothering to check on her child, who she hadn't seen since like 7 p.m. Didn't even check on her to say goodnight, just went to bed. And the two of them dismembered this child and then got into some sort of paranoid, delusional fucking fight. And Jessica attacked Fabian and Michelle. And I will note that Fabian said, oh, she attacked me with an iron. He didn't have any evidence of that. He had a black eye that he'd received the night before, being an idiot at some family event where his female cousin punched him, because these people are all just garbage. But he didn't actually have any sort of like, iron marks. It was only Michelle. So I feel like whatever happened between the two of them, they took it out on Michelle, and Jessica was trying to kill her. That's what I think happened. I think that Jessica murdered Victoria. Fabian tried to help her cover it up. Things went south. And, I am just shocked at the supreme consistent idiocy of the New Mexico police and child protective services. Now, I also want to call out that her grandparents did file a lawsuit. And of course, the state threw it out because they didn't find any fault. They were like, no, it's totally normal for us to not look into like child abuse allegations, even when there's 5 phone calls in a year for the same kid. Like, if none of them are like that big of a deal, we're just gonna fucking ignore it. We'll refer you to the police, who will refer you back to us, and nobody did anything wrong. So they threw the fucking case out. So essentially, like, nobody has been charged with the murder of this little girl. Police are quote unquote actively looking for this killer. I have a feeling it's like a 10-year-old boy who gave her a hug at school, and they're never going to figure it out because of the type of DNA it is. It's not easy to match to anybody. You can't put it into a database. It has to be like swabbed intentionally. And like, what the fuck? This whole thing is ridiculous. So that's it, man. That's the brutal, fucked up ass murder of Victoria Martens and the completely unsatisfying conclusion of what happened to the piece of shit people that murdered her. And, with good behavior, these people could be out eventually. Like, not even that long. I'd really like to think, these people are in their like 20s, 30s. I'd love to think that they're going to die in prison, but like, I don't know. And it's so crazy to me that way less fucked up shit has happened to people. People have just like murdered people in bar fights and got life without parole. And then they fucking dismember, they murder a little girl with their bare hands and dismember her corpse and set her on fire. And they get like 44 years with time served. Like, makes my fucking head hurt. There's a lot more to this case, but like, I didn't want to get into like the nitty gritty of the trial. Like, that's just not my vibe. But if you want to look into it and like, I don't know, call and yell at the officials in New Mexico, please feel free. Be my guest. I support that fully. Anyway, okay. That's it. That's the story. I'm going to go scream into a pillow now. Y'all are welcome to join me. Thanks for listening. Please like, rate, review, share with your friends and family. Hopefully Diva will be back soon, but if not, hopefully my stories are good enough to keep y'all coming back. I apologize if I sound a little crazy, but again, I am sick as shit. Hopefully next week I'll be feeling better and we'll be back with a less rage-inducing case. Until then, thanks again for listening. And be sure to stay off our lists. Bye!